The ocean has lent its evocative powers to literature since the latter's infancy. Any high schooler chasing their English credits can tell you that. And for good reason. This bad boy can fit just about every facet of the human condition in it. From life and death, to hope and despair, to future and past, unity and isolation, strength and helplessness, consciousness and subconscious, and especially the thrill of adventure and the fear of the unknown. Good or bad, yet equally sublime. All this, every experience, thought, and emotion, rendered by the movement of its waves, the depths of its icy waters, the majesty and horror of its denizens, and its mingling with wind, weather. In short, big bodies of water really get us going. And today, I can't think of a better way, within the realm of media, to experience all it has to offer us than on one of these. In one of these. My first foray into the wet world of water-centric exploration did not go swimmingly. A poor but profound first encounter with what would become one of my favorite games of all time. One could say this game was the progenitor of modern seafaring games. If there's a functioning boat, or raft, or spaceship in a modern title, then this was the inspiration. In fact, every game that holds within its world even a single drop of water owes something to this one game. Of course, I'm talking about the 21st century's quintessential sailing adventure, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. A game that did what it did so well that even its then controversial Zelda art style has since become shorthand for whimsical exploration. At 7 years old, that controversy meant nothing to me. Wind Waker Link was just like any other Link I knew, any other hero from any other game. So when Big Bird snagged Arl, I wasn't worried. I knew we'd get her back. Like, come on, I'm playing the hero. Then I ran into these guys and dove for the power button. I couldn't tell you how many fresh saves I made over the next few months, just to gaze out to sea from the safety of Outset Island. It took a long while, but I did eventually get my boat. Then on my first night sailing, the storm rolled in and the waves picked up, and these creepy guys invited me for a swim with them and who knows what else. And I dove for the power button again. Yeah, Arl was not coming back. When the winds pinned me down, when night brought monsters to drag me kicking and screaming to a watery grave, I felt powerless. A short-limbed air breather like Link was only built for sinking, and I was only built for safe, solid ground. This was supposed to be a hero fantasy, but I didn't feel like a hero. I felt insignificant, a tiny, fragile speck floating alone in a vast sea hiding unimaginable horrors. In The Wind Waker, the hero of winds begins his journey as a nobody, an unremarkable kid comfortable in his quiet corner of the Great Sea. He wasn't born a hero, it wasn't in his blood. That was a title he had to earn, and the Great Sea would be his proving ground. If he was going to stop Ganon and get his sister back, he needed courage. I needed courage. If I couldn't take the plunge, I'd be stuck on these shores with this absolute freak forever. And, well, I couldn't. The Wind Waker remains the only game I ever stopped playing, not because I didn't enjoy it, not because I was busy, not because the hardware couldn't run it, but because I was too scared to continue. When I thought of water, I thought of freedom, calm, and opportunity. When I saw it, insignificance, helplessness, loneliness, and an intense fear of the unknown on par with Lovecraft's fear of immigrants. I couldn't control where my mind went when my eyes wandered away from my tiny boat. I couldn't shake the thought that at any moment I'd spot a pair of eyes followed by a massive set of teeth, or find myself being dragged down to meet some colossal creature underwater. It was one of the most profound responses I've ever had to a game, and that feeling has never left me. This year, Black Salt Games released Dredge, a Lovecraftian fishing adventure game absolutely obsessed with the deep. In Dredge, our fisherman protagonist is at the mercy of an ocean plagued by a mysterious rot. He has ties to this ocean. He lost his wife to the waves after his initial encounter with eldritch horrors, but decades later, he remembers nothing. He doesn't know why he's sailing these waters again, but some invisible force compels him to do it. He meets a mysterious collector holding a strange book who tasks him with collecting 5 relics. Every piece of this puzzle is eerily familiar, but my fisherman can't quite put his finger on it. No matter. At the crack of dawn, I set sail in search of relics, fish, and answers, until night forces me back to safety. Save for a tiny few, the monsters that call the ocean home can't be killed. So when the sun went down, I raced back to civilization. Because those gadgets and abilities can only ever delay the inevitable. There's dozens of upgrades to get, enough to satisfy even the seasoned big number hunters out there, but Dredge provides only one guarantee: that I wouldn't survive. In those moments, I felt exactly like I did all those years ago. Anything beyond the reach of my lights was a mystery, and mystery meant danger. The ocean played with my senses. The sounds I heard, I couldn't even begin to picture their source. And if I could, I was always fatally wrong. Dredge never let me shake the feeling that eventually I'd be headed down there too. It's a losing battle from the opening minutes to the final few. The ocean and even time itself had made me an enemy, and there was no one quite so fearsome on my side, as far as I knew. And having been made uncomfortably familiar with the damage the deep could do, I wasn't sticking around to find out who was friend or foe anyway. Damn near 2 decades later, I was once again obsessed with the deep, and that morbid obsession colored my every thought and governed my every move. But just like the Wind Waker, if I didn't go mingle with the monsters, I'd never see what this ocean had to show me. And this time, the stakes were higher. I paid like $30. And so I continued to set off each morning, eyes glued to the water, scanning for the strangest fish, the scariest monsters, and other unpredictable horrors that haven't yet made themselves known. I met quite a few folks on my travels. They didn't have names. They didn't lift my spirits when I spotted them standing on the shore. They talked to me, sure, but they were distant, despondent, completely hollowed out by forces no one understands. In most stories, these would not be the most compelling characters, but in Dredge, they play their role perfectly. On these islands, there were no new connections to be made, little beauty left to cling onto. Everything and everyone was rotting from the inside out. Well, almost everyone. Glimmers of hope remain, but the dark clouds wouldn't be lifting for some time. Dredge's ocean was everything I remember the Great Sea being, a den of unknown horrors, a source of fear and insecurity, a poison that worked its way into the minds of the population. In the game's bad ending, the fisherman, controlled by the book, uses the relics to perform a ritual that successfully brings his dead wife back, dooming everyone else in the process. Hello, Cthulhu. In the good ending, he tosses the relics back into the ocean and ends this horrible cycle. The towns are saved, and the Leviathan, neither friend nor foe, claims the book and the fisherman with it. Our fisherman, the first victim and last agent of rot, disappears under the waves. Now, I didn't pick up and ponder every lore bottle, but it seems to me that the ocean, the book, his own grief, ruled the fisherman's life up until the very end. A noble sacrifice, yes. Atonement, sure. Justice carried out by what could be the ocean's true protector, perhaps. But even the good ending doesn't inspire much hope for the future of this place, even without the influence of the Eldritch. The fisherman's final act of defiance plays out behind thick fog and under the cover of night. His story ends with a whimper, and only the lighthouse keeper will ever know what he sacrificed. But hey, I made it to the credits. I wish I could say that Dredge was the reason I returned to the Wind Waker after, 20 years? A triumphant return to cap off a feel-good story, but that'd be a bit of a lie. About 3 years after I leapt across the room and slapped the GameCube power button for the last time, I hoisted my virtual sails again. And it was still terrifying. I was no less scared of the sea at age 10, still scared today. And stuff like this, and this certainly didn't help. But one thing you do learn is that it takes a village, multiple villages, to raise a hero. The Great Sea is a lonely place, but the kindness of strangers and the ties of kinship power my journey. The Wind Waker's many motley crews ooze personality, a very different kind than the denizens of Dredge's world. When I run into an old pallet sea, the world gets a little safer, the Great Sea a little less lonely, and that's a feeling that rupees or cursed relics can't buy. Those bonds also manifest in the form of the many gadgets, upgrades, and abilities Link's gifted along the way, without which I'd never get where I needed to go. And of course, the songs they taught me, songs to bend the wind to my will and change night to day. Really could have used that last one on those stormy Dredge nights. With their help and the Great Sea's brand of encouragement, I did eventually find out exactly what hid in its depths. Not Lovecraftian horrors, but the Kingdom of Hyrule. Also found out my boat wasn't a boat, but the king moonlighting as my personal taxi. And not only was he the king, he was a bad king who made bad calls, and not only did he make bad calls, he's still making them. This Link can't be the hero, he's not like the other guy from back then. The world above the waves has no future, because it's not like his precious Hyrule. Much like the fisherman, the sea is a permanent reminder of a painful past, one the king can't bring himself to let go of. And much like me, the king kept his head under the waves for a little too long, and that blinded him to the beauty of this new world above. But in facing my fears and opening up to my fellow apocalypse survivors, I discovered that the Great Sea was home to sights, secrets, and adventures like none I had ever encountered at 10. Supported by newfound friends, Link proved to the Great Sea that he was, in fact, a hero, and I proved something to myself as well. Faced with undeniable evidence of our worthiness, the king realized his error and entrusted the future to Link. That's what Wind Waker's all about. Finding the courage to move past the past, making connections and bringing everybody together to build a better tomorrow, nurturing all that's still good in this post-apocalyptic water park. The Great Sea, once unpredictable and incomprehensible, a place defined by loneliness and fear, became one of hope and opportunity. Link gives the Great Sea a reason to notice him. In spite of it all, his own insignificance, his fears, an army of who knows what out to stop him, Link finds the courage to set sail, to fight, to reach out, and he's rewarded. He rises to the occasion and becomes the hero of winds. The fisherman doesn't. No cool name for him, no name at all. If he's like anyone, it's the king, though he isn't afforded nearly as much closure. In Dredge, everyone is at the mercy of incomprehensible evils greater than them. No matter how hard you fight, its monsters will sink you and its knights will break you. But in the Wind Waker, terrifying monsters turn into mild nuisances, strict rules become malleable, and the unknown becomes known. The Great Sea of the Wind Waker and the Ocean of Dredge are home to two different stories with two different outcomes. But they're united in their ability to leverage the ocean to inspire reflection and evoke powerful emotions in us, the explorers. In the years between the Wind Waker and Dredge, I've gotten to sail and swim dozens of virtual oceans. Most of them not quite as gripping as my first and latest experiences, but always interesting. One, because of the nature of seafaring itself. Much of our time in the world of video games is spent with our virtual feet planted on virtual ground. Ditching the horse for a boat forces players to reckon with a crucial, but often ill-considered part of the experience: traversal. A break from tired verbs like running and jumping and climbing and riding, plus some new sights, sounds, and smells, are sure to keep your mind in the present rather than 800 meters in the future, at least for a little while. So many other things. But for some players, that's just not enough. These oceans are shallow, and the novelty of their quirks and aesthetics are superficial distractions. For me, though, it's a cheat code that works every single time, because there's always an extra something buried under those waves. That something varies from game to game, person to person, but the cold, wet truth is that the ocean's evocative powers make it the perfect muse. The ocean seeps into every single facet of these games. Every single decision the developers or the players is informed by those visceral feelings that drew them to it, the thrilling mix of emotional opposites that's characteristic of the ocean. For me, it's the constant back and forth between my desire to discover and the fear of finding out. That sense of freedom and that feeling of joy tinged with anxiety every time I raise my sail in the Wind Waker. The creeping unease and childlike curiosity Dredge instilled in me. The voices that urged me back to safety an hour before curfew, then pushed me back out an hour before it lifted. For the king and for the fisherman, it was something different. For you, for the developers, it could be something different. The ocean showed Nintendo something. It showed Black Salt Games something else. And now they want to share that with us, to have their experiences mingle with ours. And it's always something that can only be expressed, again, through this. The ocean is not only a muse, it's also an ideal canvas. And until I feel otherwise, I'll never miss a chance to set sail in a video game.